Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron and welcome back today to another live stream. It is Wednesday, I hope you all are doing well. It is the game review to Everton's 3-0 defeat to Manchester City at the Etihad last Sunday. I do apologise that this review is being streamed on a Wednesday. I've been suffering with a slight chest infection over the last couple of days. It absolutely put me to bed on Monday. I couldn't get out of bed. Yesterday I was a bit better but still quite raspy, so I thought I didn't want to basically come and sit down and effectively just cough my head off for an hour and in between coughing say the odd negative thing about Everton Football Club. I thought I'd just wait until I'm at least a little bit better, and here we are today. I'm getting there, not quite fully there, but I'm getting there. I'm in the right frame of physical mind to be able to sit down and have a little moan about what we witnessed on Sunday afternoon, because it wasn't great, was it? You know, let's be honest, I don't think anybody had high hopes going into this game. I don't think any Evertonian, deep down was thinking, yeah, well, we're going to go, beat Man City away from home. We're going to go and get a result at the Etihad. I think everybody had this sort of pessimistic mentality going into the game. And listen, I said it on Friday during the game preview to this one, that mentality and that feeling doesn't come from nothing. We haven't got this mentality of Everton going away to sides like Manchester City and getting absolutely embarrassed every time we do it because, it's come out of nowhere. We've gotten it through years and years of, absolutely dreadful performances, squads of players that just don't care and just aren't good enough, and yet just incompetency running throughout the football club for the last 10, 12, 15, however many years it's been. Everton haven't been a success for a long time, and it seems like there's certain people in this board that are happy with where Everton are and almost, seem to have this idea and opinion that us as Evertonians and us as fans who, pour our hard-earned money into this football club should be pleased with where we are, should be grateful that, Everton are competing to finish in the top 10 in the Premier League every year. We should be grateful for that. Well, no, that's not how it is. If Everton aren't winning things, then I'm not happy. If Everton aren't winning trophies, competing for trophies, then I'm not satisfied. Going to Manchester City and losing 3-0, this shouldn't be an expectation. It shouldn't be an expectation where we look at this game and think, yeah, we're going to get battered there, so whatever the result is, it doesn't really matter. Yes, I can sit here as a realistic Evertonian, I can sit here and have that element of realism, which is that Manchester City are a much better side than we are. They've got much better players than we have, and ultimately that's why a result like Sunday's occurred, because they're just a much better team. But I can't help, and I couldn't help on Sunday when I was sitting watching the game, but have a sort of stick in my throat, a thorn in my throat, because whilst there was an acceptance that Manchester City is so much better than we are, and that performance and that result was probably to be expected, this isn't an Everton team who have spent, 10 million over the last 5, 6, 7 years. This isn't the same Everton side. This isn't the same club that David Moyes managed 10, 15 years ago, where we didn't have a pot to piss in and we couldn't go out and sign a player for 20, 30, 40 million. We couldn't pay a player, 100, 120, 130,000 pounds a week. If this was that Everton team, then I'd look at this game and go, well, listen, how are we meant to compete with Manchester City? We can't spend the money that they can. We can't bring in the players that they can. We can't work like they can. So we're obviously going to be beaten by every time we come up against them. And I'm not saying that we've spent the same amount of money as Manchester City have, but this is an Everton side who have spent £500 million over the last 5 or 6 years. £500 million on this squad. Various different managers, various different players on upwards of 80, 90, 100, 110,000 pounds per week, and we're still at a stage where we face sides like Manchester City and think, well, we're going to get battered here because they're so much better than us. Again, as I said, I'm not sitting here saying that we've spent as much as Man City or we should be as good as Man City, but we should at least be able to go into these games thinking, do you know what, we'll give these a game here. I guarantee when West Ham face Manchester City this season, they'll think, do you know what, we'll give these a go here. We might lose, but we'll give them we'll make it difficult for them. Leicester every year make it difficult for Manchester City. Chelsea, Liverpool, those teams can go to Man City, and although they mightn't get 3 points, they can at least walk away saying, we made it tough for them there. Everton can't do that. Everton simply can't do that. And whilst, as I said, I expected us to get nothing less than a beating on Sunday, the way in which we performed, the way in which these players performed was nothing short of, as the title reads, another absolutely dismal display. No spirit, no heart, no fight, no desire, no passion. And it is that defeatist mentality. And we spoke about it on Friday, that mentality of these players, that is when they step off that bus and walk into the Etihad, it's, we know we're getting swatted here, so what's the point? There's no sort of belief that they can get anything out of the game, and yet the players might come out before the game and say, you know, again, yeah, it'll be a difficult one, but we believe in ourselves, this, that and the other. Bollocks, utter bollocks. You know what I was watching last night? I was watching Ben Foster's vlog of the game against Manchester United. You know, Ben Foster, Watford goalkeeper, does the, you know, the YouTube channel, and he inserted a clip in his vlog of the Manchester United game, which was of Jeff Shreves, I think it was, interviewing him before the game, and he said a specific thing that stuck to me, and what he said was, we understand as players of Watford Football Club, something along these lines, I'm paraphrasing here, we understand as players of Watford Football Club that there's a certain couple of teams in this league, and you name them, Manchester City, Liverpool and Chelsea, I think he mentioned, that you sort of understand that, you know, you're probably not going to turn up and get 3 points at. It's going to be very difficult, and it's going to be a different sort of game plan as to what you would usually adapt. In fact, I don't even think he mentioned Chelsea. I think he just mentioned Man City and Liverpool, or he just said there's two teams in this league that, you know, you'd understand that you're going to turn up against, and it's going to be a bit defensive. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a hard day. But he said, and this was before the game, he said, but there's 17 other teams or 16 other teams that I firmly believe we can beat on our day. We can take 3 points from, we can turn up and we can beat. And that's that belief. Now, some would say, yeah, well, you should have that belief going into every game. That's fine. But Ben Foster's coming out there and saying, taking away these two sides who are light years above everybody else, we go into every other game believing that we're more than good enough to beat this team. Everton don't do that. These players simply don't have that mentality. You know, we watched less than 3 weeks ago Crystal Palace turn up against Manchester City and beat them. You know, perform really, really well. But even teams that don't beat Manchester City, you see teams all the time turn up and give them problems, give them issues, battle with them. And yes, they might lose. Yes, they might come away with nothing at the end of it. But they've given them a tough game. You know, they've battled with them. They've made it hard. They've made it physical. They've created chances. They've been a little bit unlucky. Sometimes they've even scored goals. This Everton team don't do any of that whatsoever. We just roll over constantly, week in, week out, and I'm sick of it. That's me and Ayla dropping on the floor, by the way. So if you see me bend down in about 5 or 10 minutes, it's because I've run out of breath and I need to grab it. But this Everton team just don't have any of that. There's no belief in themselves, but there doesn't seem to be any want to believe either. There's no sort of motivation. It's not like, okay, we're playing the champions away today. It's going to be a difficult game. But you know what, lads? Let's rally up. We can get at these. We can make it tough for them. And if we're not going to win, then make it hard for them. It's almost like, well, we know we're going to lose here, so we'll just roll over and get our belly tickled. You know, the 5-0 was embarrassing towards the end of the season. The last game of last season. That was embarrassing on Sunday. Because we didn't make it hard for them. And yes, they're a fantastic footballing side. And yes, they're one of the best teams in the world. Champions League finalists, this, that and the other. Amazing players. Amazing, you know, there's plenty of reasons and reason as to why we can go into Manchester City beating Everton. They've got a squad much better than we have. They've spent more money than we have, etc., etc. But there wasn't even that belief to think we can cause these problems here. You know, even little situations, Alex Iwobi, and I tweeted this out and said Alex Iwobi's one-on-one with the goalkeeper and he turned around and people were replying saying, I wouldn't say he was one-on-one. Look at the screenshot. Alex Iwobi is a good 10 yards in front of Kyle Walker. Now, I know Kyle Walker's very, very fast, but we're talking about Alex Iwobi, who is, according to his teammates, that the club openly put this video on social media, he's the most skillful player at the football club, according to his teammates. This was when James Rodriguez was at the club, technically one of world's best footballers. But Alex Iwobi, according to his teammates, is one of the most skillful players at the club, or the most skillful player at the club. We're talking about a young lad who's meant to be quick, fast, quick thinking, can move the ball forward, can beat a man. Now, I'd understand if he burst with his run and Kyle Walker caught up to him, I'd say, you know, he's very quick, Kyle Walker, there's not many quicker than him. He stopped and turned round. He almost got into that position and shit himself and sort of thought, oh shit, I could be in danger of getting into a goal scoring opportunity here. I don't want to be here, so I'm going to turn around and lose the ball. It's that mentality of almost, we can't cause Manchester City issues because then that would be going against, what everybody expects. And why would we want to go against what everybody expects? That's one of the biggest issues at this football club. But again, I don't want this to turn into a rant about the board, because we are going to do another live stream over the next few days where we talk about the board, because I've got a lot to say about the board. I really, really have. We're going to do another stream tomorrow, which is going to be specifically about the under-23s and the development cycle for young players. The ultimately the transition between under-23 football and first team football, because it's non-existent at Everton Football Club. There's been rumours today, there's been an article today from The Athletic stating that Lewis Dobbin, his contract talks still haven't gone any further. He's out in the summer. He's free to talk to clubs in Europe, I believe, in January. We obviously saw Thierry Small leave because he felt there was no pathway into the first team. It's not like we've got 45 world-class strikers that are stopping Lewis Dobbin from getting game time. We've got Solomon Rondon, who's done fuck all since he's come in, and we've got Cenk Tosun, who sprays his hair on in training sessions. And nothing against spraying your hair on in training sessions, but he's not very good, is he? Let's be honest. So again, that's another video. We're going to talk about that tomorrow, and then I want to go in on the board. I want to go in on the ball quite heavily in a separate video, to be honest with you, because it seems like this club have got this mentality of, you should all be grateful for where we are and what we do. An example of it is last week, the club released a statement regarding the AGM, shareholders AGM, and within the statement, one of the lines was, although the club isn't permitted to hold an AGM, we feel we feel like it is our duty to, or something along those lines. And it basically read to me that they're saying, you should be lucky that we're doing this for you. Hang on. You should feel accountable to come out and explain to us why what we're seeing on the pitch is an utter shit show. Why after £500 million of investment, this team is still utter wank and mid-table mediocre at the very, very best. You should explain to me why key players are getting injured every 10 minutes. Damari Gray, another one, who knows how long he's going to be out for. The board should feel a need to come out and address fans, not just shareholders, because not everyone's a shareholder. I'm not a shareholder. I'm sure Peter's not a shareholder. Eugene, Mitchell, David, Jason. I'm sure that nobody watching in the live comments now is a shareholder. So what good is it addressing shareholders? What? Because they put their money into the football club, do they? Well, don't I buy my season ticket every year? Spend 500 quid. By the way, that's going up over the next over the next year or so. So just because I don't put a bit more in and, get a fancy seat or, get a nice meal of a match day, am I not as important as a shareholder? Despite the fact that I turn up week in, week out to watch this shite. Why can't you do it at a public AGM? If you can't do one live in the flesh, the club have done them previously at St George's Hall, I believe. If you can't do one of them because of, COVID and restrictions, etc., host it online. All it takes is a Zoom link to put out on Twitter for everybody to join. Why not host it online? Why is it so secretive? Why has it got to be only to the shareholders? And why even have the, as I said, it's almost like they've had the bollocks to come out and think, yeah, do you know what? I know what's a good thing to say, yeah. We're going to say that. We don't have to do this so that it makes it look dead good that we're doing it. No. Word to Everton, you do have to do it. Because us as fans deserve an explanation as to what's going on at this football club. What's Marcel Brands' job? Because effectively, it's one or two things. He's either not being allowed to do his job properly, or he ain't very good at doing the job properly. Now, we can have the Marcel Brands argument all day long, and in that Athletic article talking about Lewis Dobbin, there was a section in it saying that Marcel Brands has demanded that the under-23s use the same formation as the first team so that it's better for the players when transitioning into the first team. That's great, that's brilliant, fair play to Marcel Brands for doing that, very, very good. Don't matter if none of the young lads are going to get a chance anyway, doesn't matter, they may as well play a fucking 8-2-0, because if none of them are going to get an opportunity in the first team, it don't matter. But fair enough to Marcel Brands. But why is Marcel Brands not coming out and addressing every single Evertonian as to why we didn't bring in a right back in the summer? Why isn't Marcel Brands coming out and addressing why Niles Nkunku had gone out on loan, and the club were happy to allow Thierry Small to leave, giving us no defensive cover for left back. Why isn't the club coming out? Why isn't Marcel Brands coming out and talking to us about why we have got no direct replacement for Abdoulaye Doucouré, who very clearly is such an important player to this Everton side and the system in which Rafa Benitez plays? Why the club feel like they're doing us a favour by holding an AGM is nonsense. They should feel like they're forced to do it. And even so, they're holding it for shareholders, so the majority of Evertonians like myself, and I'm sure most people watching, will only get snippets from social media as to what's being said. But as I said, the board is a completely different conversation. The reality is, we're here to review the game on Sunday, and it was what I think we all expected. And as I said at the start of the season, those expectations don't come out of nowhere. We didn't wake up as Evertonians one day and go, I expect us to be shit today. You know, I remember a time under David Moyes, and where you'd go to Manchester City, and okay, Manchester City weren't as strong and weren't as good as they are now, but you'd sort of expect to get a result there. You'd sort of expect even the top teams. Okay, under David Moyes we didn't do well against the top six, but you'd expect a battle. You'd expect a fight. You mightn't expect Everton to win because our squad was never as good as those teams were, or the players were never as good as the players that those teams had. But you'd at least expect 100%. You'd at least expect a fight, a battle, making it difficult for those teams, making it tough, dogs of war style football. Now, I just expect Everton to go in and roll over. And I look at the upcoming fixtures. We've got Brentford on Sunday, a Brentford side who have done well since coming into the Premier League. Again, we're looking like at the moment we'll be without Demarai Gray. Now, there's no official statements as to how long he'll be out for yet, but there was rumours it'd be up to 6 weeks. Now, they are just merely rumours, so I wouldn't take anything out of them, and apparently, according to the Liverpool Echo, the club have they're hopeful that it won't be as serious as first deemed. However, the same was said about Dominic Calvert-Lewin. The reality is he's likely to be out on Sunday for the game against Brentford. So what's going to happen then? And this is where the manager comes into question as well. Is Alex Iwobi going to start on Sunday, knowing full well that he's probably not going to do anything? Is he going to give Lewis Dobbin a chance? Absolutely brilliant in the under-23s the other night. Absolutely fantastic last night. So is he going to get a chance to show? Is Ellis Sims going to get an opportunity? 20 years old now, just signed a new contract. What's the pathway for Ellis Sims? What's the pathway for Lewis Dobbin? Maybe that's why Lewis Dobbin is stalling a new contract, because he's thinking, I'm too good for the under-23s here, and it don't look like I've got a pathway into the Everton first team, so why would I sign a new contract? Where's the pathway for these players? This would be a perfect opportunity for Rafa Benitez on Sunday to go to Lewis Dobbin. Right, you're playing, Richie's up front, Townsend's on the left, or the right, Dobbin on the left, or vice versa, Gordon through the middle. Let's see how that works. Bit of passion, because these young lads, at the very, very least, and Anthony Gordon's proven this over the last couple of weeks, at the very, very least, they'll work hard. Anthony Gordon was very, very poor on Sunday. Very, very poor. But he worked hard. He ran round. He battled. He's nowhere near the level of João Cancelo or Phil Foden. Of course he isn't. He's absolutely nowhere near that level. But he worked hard. He battled. He gave it 100%. And yes, some people will say sometimes that's not good enough, Cam. But you know what I'd say to people who might say that? Would you rather a player that isn't good enough and doesn't give a fuck, or isn't good enough but actually cares and wants to work hard and battle and throw himself in front of challenges and win the ball back and give it 100%? Because the reality of the situation is, with Everton at the moment, this squad isn't good enough. It isn't. And that's not anything that we're not used to. As I said before, under David Moyes, most of David Moyes' squads weren't good enough. But one thing they all had in common is David Moyes demanded they all worked 150% every time they went on that pitch. And if they didn't, they weren't in the team. That's not the case for this Everton team. And also, what's more infuriating is that David Moyes side hadn't spent £500 million. This Everton team now, currently under various different managers in various different regimes, has spent that money. And there's nobody to take accountability. There's nobody to take responsibility. The reality of the situation is, in the 6 years that Farhad Moshiri has been at Everton Football Club, He joined us the season after we finished 5th with Roberto Martinez, I believe. I think it was the season after we finished 5th with Roberto Martinez. David Moyes had just left. Really positive season. Romelu Lukaku, Ross Barkley, etc., etc. He joined us then. Now, since then, we've actually gone backwards. We've spent £500 million. We've had a couple of seasons where we've finished 8th. The majority of the rest of the seasons we've finished between 10th and 12th. Now, somebody has to take responsibility for that. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's Farhad Moshiri's responsibility, but one thing I can definitely say is Farhad Moshiri has not got a fucking clue about football. It's as clear as that. He has not got a clue about football. So I don't know whether Farhad Moshiri is having too much of a say on this football club, considering he ain't got a clue about football, or he's employing the wrong people who also don't seem to have a clue about football. But that's, as I said, that's an argument for a different video. That's irrelevant. The point is that this football club has had £500 million of investment and has gone backwards, and nobody is there to take responsibility. One fella has lost his job over the last however many years, as to what I can, remember, and it was Danny Donacci the other week for fitness reasons, because Rafa Benitez demanded the change in the fitness team. Yes, the business is probably going in the right way. We had this conversation the other day on the channel. We done a live stream. If you haven't checked it out, please do so. It's titled, "Is Football a Priority for Everton, for Everton's board?" Because we had this conversation. At Everton's board, sitting in their board meetings saying, yeah, we've just got battered by Man City. The players don't really care. They're all not very good. Manager, again, the fans are getting behind, on the back of him because of his past, this, that and the other. But that doesn't matter because we've got a Boss New Stadium on the way. Because I said in that video, and I'll say it again, don't matter how good Bramley-Moore looks. If we're playing championship football in it, people aren't going to be very happy. I'm seeing people on Twitter now saying they'd sacrifice Bramley-Moore for a whole new board. Now, obviously it's very far down the line, and again, that's an opinion that some people will agree with, some people won't agree with. But one thing is for sure is serious changes need to be made at Everton Football Club. Serious changes need to be made at Everton Football Club. Because, and I say this on the back of this game, changing the manager does nothing. So for those Blues out there that want Rafa Benitez out, fair enough. Everybody is entitled to their own opinion, and I understand that, and I appreciate it. But I can almost guarantee you now that Rafa Benitez walks out that door tonight, you could replace him with anybody, past and present. They don't change what's going on at Everton Football Club, because it's the same group of players who have let down manager after manager after manager. It's the same board who are incompetent and haven't got a fucking clue about football. It's the same people in the background. It's the same ex-players that are getting jobs just because they're ex-players and not actually because they're any good at the job. It's the same problems at this football club. So you can change the manager all you like, and yes, you might get a bit of a spike in improvement because you get that managerial, honeymoon or whatever it's called. But in the long run, it changes nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that's why I'm not quick to jump on Rafa Benitez's back. Yes, he's made some bad decisions since joining Everton Football Club, substitutions-wise, starting 11-wise. He's made some difficult decisions. He's made some poor decisions. I agree. Obviously, he come into the football club with no money to spend, which is incredibly difficult to manage in a Premier League where every team is spending hundreds of millions of pounds, or certainly the teams that are trying to finish in Europe. And he's come into a football club that ultimately have had, as I said, with the exception of Alan and Andros Townsend, every one of our main players out injured so far. Dean, who hasn't even had a great season and start himself, Coleman, Pickford, Decore, Gray now, Richarlison, Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Richarlison misses the game against Brentford. So even when I said before, I'd have Richarlison, Dobbin and Townsend. Richarlison misses the game against Brentford because he got a yellow card on Sunday. So are we going to see, and this is where I suppose Rafa Benitez's question comes into it, the question around Rafa Benitez comes into it. Are we going to see a front four on Sunday of Alex Iwobi, Anthony Gordon, Andros Townsend and Solomon Rondon? Or are we going to see a front four of maybe Anthony Gordon, Lewis Dobbin, Andros Townsend, and maybe I'd say, Rondon or Iwobi, as long as Dobbin or Sims is in one of the other places. I don't think I can watch Alex Iwobi and Solomon Rondon for 90 minutes. do absolutely nothing against the Brentford side that are going to look at this Everton team and think we can really, really embarrass these here if we're at our top game. We lose on Sunday. No momentum going into the Merseyside derby. Them lot are on absolute fire. They could have a field day at Goodison. What happens then? Everybody turns on the manager. Everybody turns on the players again. Everybody turns against the club. And the board think, do you know what we'll do? We'll sack him just before Christmas. And everyone will have a boost again. Doesn't matter. Does not matter. The same issues will still persist. They will still persist until a lot of people at this football club are moved out the door and told to never come back. Never, ever, ever come back. But anyway, as I said, if you're watching that, by the way, please hit that like button. It does only take a second. I've noticed over the last few days that YouTube have removed the dislike counter. You can still dislike the video. I wouldn't suggest you do. Please don't. But you can. I can't see how many dislikes people have got. So hopefully that prompts people to leave a like, because I can see the like. So if you could leave a like, that would mean a great deal to me. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. That would only take a second. Share the stream as well on social media. That would be absolutely brilliant. If you could get the stream out to as many people as we possibly can, that would be absolutely fantastic. But let's get into the game anyway. Rafa Benitez starts with unexpected starting 11. Let's be honest, Jordan Pickford in goal, Luca Dean at left back. We obviously had Michael Keane and Ben Godfrey as our centre halves, with Seamus Coleman at right back. Interesting to see him going with a forward at the back. I think had Mason Holgate being available for this game, he might have gone for the 5 at the back, but he didn't really have many options. As I said on Friday, the only other option would have been Jared Branthwaite, and I don't think he's quite ready, and John Joe Kenny, I don't think he's good enough. Obviously, we had Alan and Fabian Delph in the midfield. Anthony Gordon was in there as well. Damari Gray on the left, Andros Townsend on the right, and Richarlison up front. And we started in the first 5 minutes quite brightly. To be honest, we actually had the first sort of attack of the game, and I call it an attack because nothing quite come of it really, did it? But you could see within the opening couple of minutes that Damari Gray was, as he's been on a number of occasions this season, always going to be our out point in that game. He was always going to be the player that we looked at. He was always going to be the player that we looked at to create chances. Richarlison was playing in that sort of, Richarlison was playing in that centre forward role, which meant that he ultimately wasn't going to be on in the wide areas to create chances. So therefore, he was always going to have a quiet day. Let's be honest. But as I said, he was relying on other players to create chances, and those other players were Andros Townsend and Damari Gray. And as I said, in the first couple of minutes, we burst into the box. Damari Gray with a really good bit of play, gets into a good area, tries to get a shot off, and it's defended well by Manchester City. Nothing too difficult. And again, it's quite generous to call it a half chance, but considering the way the rest of the game went, I am going to call it an half chance, because I think we had 3 touches in the opposition box in that opening first 4 or 5 minutes of the game on that attack. And those were the only 3 or 4 touches we had in the opposition box for the majority of the rest of the game. In fact, I'm not even quite sure we had any more at any other point. And as I said, we looked bright. Obviously, Manchester City, as you would expect, controlling the ball, controlling the possession, controlling the play, come forward on a couple of occasions. And Everton's backline, I felt, done relatively well to defend the threat. Phil Foden had a chance early on with the ball come in and he headed it over. Probably should have done better, although he done well to get his head on the end of it. There was another chance, I can't remember who it was, but somebody shot and it deflected out and Jordan Pickford had to watch it past his post. Effectively, Man City were getting forward and asking the questions, and whilst they weren't massively threatening Everton, I would also say that our backline wasn't massively in control either. It wasn't like, every ball that come in, we defended it brilliantly. There was an element of luck in a lot of the chances Man City had in that opening 10 or 15 minutes. And then the big changing point in the game come for Everton. Damari Gray goes down, holding what seemed to be at first his groin, but I believe it was his thigh in the end. And you sort of knew as soon as he went down that was going to be his afternoon over. And I sort of knew from that point as well that it was going to be, if it wasn't already very, very difficult for Everton to get, a result out of this game, certainly a result which would have meant us scoring with Damari Gray on the pitch, it was 10 times more difficult with him off the pitch, because, as I said, countless times this season he's looked like our most creative player. He's thrown countless amounts of quality balls into the box. He can take players on, and although recently he hasn't been amazing, he has certainly been more effective than, say, an Alex Iwobi who come on to replace him. So the Marty Gray goes off, and as I said, not only is that a massive sort of kick in the teeth for that game, but then obviously it leaves us all worrying about what that injury is and how long that injury will keep him out for ultimately, because he is ultimately another one of our better players that is now going to spend some time on the sideline. There's questions as to how that was allowed to happen. Listen, injuries are injuries, and you can't predict them, and ultimately you can't, I suppose you can't really stop them from happening. However, there is certainly measures and precautions you can put into place to reduce the risk of injuries happening, and one of those is to not play a certain player in every single minute of football that you can play him in. And I feel like Everton and Rafa Benitez has fell into that trap with Demarai Gray. We saw it last season with Alan and Abdoulaye Doucouré. I think we even had a conversation at one point last season where we said, listen, if Abdoulaye Doucouré doesn't have a rest, he's going to get injured. Lo and behold, he didn't get a rest. A couple of weeks later, he got injured for 9 weeks and missed, the end of the season, which was a massively important period of games for Everton Football Club. Demarai Gray, as I said, played, I think, pretty much every minute available to him, barring in maybe one game. And as I said, he's ultimately he's picked up an injury, and we wish him a speedy recovery, and we hope that we hope to see him back in the Everton team very, very soon. But Alex Iwobi comes on to replace him, and as I said, I don't just want to have a go at Alex Iwobi because everybody else does, and it's he's the easy target. Some Evertonians would still say, listen, he's playing out of position. He's not playing in his right position. He's not being allowed to play in his right position. So ultimately we can't have too much of a go at him because of that. And I get that. I get it. I get that. He would probably himself say that he prefers to play in a number 10 role. To be fair, he's played there as well and not really done anything. But I understand that some people will be there to back Alex Iwobi up. And as I said, I don't just want to have a go at him for the sake of having a go at him because other people like to have a go at him. But the reality is he hasn't done anything of note in recent weeks and months to give me the confidence to believe that when he comes on that pitch on Sunday afternoon against the champions, one of the best backlines in the world, one of the best midfields in the world, that he's going to cause them any sort of issue. I mean, if he couldn't cause a Wolves backline any sort of issue, and I know he scored in that game, but if he couldn't cause them any issue, he was very unlikely going to cause Manchester City any problems, and that was the case within the opening 10-15 minutes of him coming on. And again, I'm pointing him out because he was the change. He was the player that come on for Demarai Gray. He gave the ball away 2 or 3 times in a really, really dangerous area, which, as I said, you can't do against Manchester City. Like I said before, he had that chance at 0-0, I believe it was, to absolutely pelt forward and, get in the box and at least cause Kyle Walker an issue. Get to the edge of the box or get to the box and take him on. We know he's skillful. The rest of the squad seem to think he's the most skillful player in the squad. Get to the edge of the box and take him on, but he doesn't. He shits himself. He stops, and maybe that comes with a lack of confidence. Maybe that's because of a lack of game time, whatever. But ultimately, it's not good enough. It's just not good enough. That having that opportunity against Manchester City and stopping and turning around, or stopping and almost thinking, I don't want to go any further, it's just not good enough. He had another one where he was on the right hand side and Richarlison was through the middle and he had a chance to play him through and he didn't, or he missed the pass. It just wasn't, again, it reeked of a player who didn't really want to be on the pitch, to be honest. It reeked of a player who sort of was put on there because he was the only natural winger, but he didn't really want to be there. And the giving the ball away was the most frustrating thing for me. We can talk about the chance where he could have drove into the box. We can talk about the chance where he could have passed to Richarlison. But the giving the ball away was, for me, the most frustrating. And the reason being is because you're coming up against a side like Manchester City, who are automatically going to have 95% possession anyway. You know, I said this after the 5-0 defeat towards the back end of last season. There's no need to give Manchester City any more of the ball than what they'll already have. They will already have the majority of the possession. So the reality is, when you play Manchester City and you get the ball, what you've got to do is hold the ball. And you've got to make sure that you're not giving it away stupidly. You're not just playing, nonsense passes up the field for no reason. You're not just lumping it forward for the sake of it. And this is all part and parcel and feeds into that mentality of, are these players confident that they can go and get something out of this game? Do these players believe in their own ability? Because if the answer to that question is no, which I believe it is no, then that would make sense as to why every time they're getting the ball, they're just lumping it forward. They're just sort of thinking, shit, I don't want this, put it further along that way. It's not calm, it's not cool, it's not like, right, okay, there's an acceptance that we're not going to have much of the ball here. So when we get the ball, keep it. Nice, easy passes, movements, work it well, don't panic, don't give it away stupidly, don't give it away in silly areas. Just, try and move it forward and create chances like Crystal Palace did 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's not a hard concept, but we didn't. And we don't. We do what we do all of the time against these types of sides, or against any side that puts pressure on us, really. Not even just the best sides. Any team that has a high press, we do this against. And we done it against Man City last time out. As soon as we get the ball back, we lump it forward, and within a millisecond, they've got the ball again. And that's what we were doing. As I said, Man City are constantly, at this point, the chances were very, 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 very few and far between for Everton. And by few and far between, I mean half opportunities. The Alex Iwobi one where he turns round, I don't know why he does it. Half opportunity. The one where he could have fed Richarlison in, he completely misses the pass. And Manchester City come on the counter-attack. And as I said, Man City constantly pressuring, throwing balls forward. And it become an inevitability, really, didn't it? It become a case of not, if they'll score, and more so when they'll score. And that goal come, to be fair, in very, very good fashion. João Cancelo, who I think is an absolute world-class footballer, absolutely unbelievable player, plays a world-class pass into Raheem Sterling. Michael Keane is effectively stood staring at the advertising board, I think, almost thinking, what can I have for me tea? He runs off Michael Keane and he puts the ball in the back of the net. Look, again, a little bit of, I suppose, sympathy for Michael Keane. When you're watching in slow motion, it's very easy to look at Michael Keane and think, how has Raheem Sterling just ran off you like that? When you watch it in real time, the ball from Cancelo is amazing. It's played at such speed, and Sterling reads it amazingly. And hasn't scored for about 48 years, probably won't score for another 48 years, but he always scores against Everton. Buries it in the back of the net, and it's 1-0 to Manchester City. And from that point on, again, I think we all sort of knew, right, okay, this is going to be difficult. Unless Manchester City make a mistake. And even if Manchester City were to make a mistake, Everton would have to be awake and alive enough to capitalise on that mistake. And one thing that became quite evidently clear on Sunday was that defensively, midfield-wise, we weren't awake. The amount of times that Manchester City were able to just walk through our midfield, and yes, you might say, well, that's because they've got, better players than Everton have. That's because they're a much better team than Everton are. Maybe, but I just think there was a number of times when we could have been a little bit more aware to situations. We could have been a little bit more awake to situations. We could have been a little bit more, okay, well, I'll get it easier, or I'll read that pass, or I'll read that ball. I think that whole just better than us is an excuse. To be honest, it's an excuse, because they're better than Crystal Palace, but Palace beat them. They're much better than Tottenham, but Tottenham beat them. They've been much better than Wolves since Wolves come back into the Premier League, but Wolves have beaten them. They've been much better than a lot of teams, but they've lost a lot of games. They've been much better than United for the last 10 years. United have still beaten them at the Etihad on a number of occasions. So that whole, they're just a better team than we are, is too easy of an excuse for me. It's almost like the players adopted that. I don't really need to be as switched on here, because there's an acceptance that they're much better than what we are anyway, so it doesn't matter, it's alright. No, absolutely not. It's a nonsense, defeatist disgusting mentality that needs ridden out of this football club. And anybody that watched that game on Sunday and think it's acceptable needs going with it. Just because they're the champions and they're so much better than we are doesn't mean it's acceptable. We're not fucking, Notts County. No offence to Notts County. We're not fucking, Tranmere. We're not, no offence to Tranmere. We're not sitting here saying, yeah, well, these are one of the best teams in the world and we're just plucky little old Everton. But maybe that's what the board are saying. Maybe that's how the board do feel. Maybe the board are saying, we're just little old Everton, so, it doesn't really matter. It does. It's not good enough. It's simply not good enough. They go 1-0 up, and as I said, from that point on, personally, in my mind, I felt like it was always going to be increasingly difficult to get back into the game, especially considering we'd seen that the odd couple of times that we broke forward, we either gave the ball away or players just didn't seem interested in creating a chance. One of our most creative players had gone off at this point, and Man City were throwing everything at us still. Probably hadn't got out of second gear, to be fair, but we're throwing everything at us. And yeah, as I said, it gets to half time and Man City have again put pressure on us. They've had another number of opportunities. Jordan Pickford's had to make a couple of good saves. He's had to rush out. We've had to defend a couple of corners. And you're sort of thinking, how can this be changed? But we're also at the same time, it's only 1-0. We're only 1-0 down. They could make a mistake, and we could capitalise on it, get to 1-1, and then hold out for a draw. That's possible. It's within the realms of possibility, and of course it was. But in my mind, I just felt Man City could make 5 mistakes here, 10 mistakes. This Everton team wouldn't be switched on to turn those mistakes into chances. That's honestly how I felt. Or if they were switched on, their technical ability or their whatever would let them down in the end. I just felt I was sort of edging on the hope that one of the centre halves would slip up and Richarlison would get in, because Richarlison was the only player in that during that game, after watching that first half, even though he wasn't very busy, that I felt I was confident in he'd take a chance. The others, no, not really. I thought Townsend was poor. Don't think he'd done much. Worked hard, yeah, but I thought he was poor. Iwobi, as I mentioned, poor. Anthony Gordon, as I said before, worked hard, ran round, battled, gave us all, but ultimately poor. Didn't really do much. Defensively, we were just holding on, really. It reminded me of a footballing version of somebody hanging off a mountain with one arm and there being a breeze. It was almost like we're just sort of holding on here, but we can't hold on for much longer. Midfield was simply all over the place. And again, when you have a midfield with absolutely no pace in it whatsoever coming up against Manchester City, you're always going to struggle. But there was, as I said, there was a little sort of, well, it's only 1-0. Maybe we can get back into this game, but the performance was so uninspiring, because it wasn't like we were sitting there going, we're only 1-0 down, but we've had a couple of chances here, we're getting at them, we're causing them problems, we're causing them issues, we can get back into this. It was we're 1-0 down, yeah, but it could have well been 4 or 5, and we're not doing anything to suggest that that'll change. And that was where that problem come in for me. We will get into the second half in just a moment, but let me get into the live comments first, because I'm cautious that there's loads of live comments. Massive thank you to everybody for getting involved in all the comments. I really, really do appreciate it. If you're watching it live, please hit that like button. It only takes a second. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. As I said, if you're watching live, get your thoughts in the live comments, and we will be getting involved with as many of them as we can. If you're watching a YouTube video, get your thoughts in the YouTube comments, and we will try and get involved with as many of them as well. Eugene says Branthwaite should get another chance in Everton's defence. Listen, I don't know. Obviously, we'll hear from Rafa Benitez on Friday, and hopefully we'll have an injury update on Abdoulaye Doucouré and Yerry Mina. Who knows whether Yerry Mina will or will not be fit, but I highly doubt Jared Branthwaite will start on Sunday. I just don't think he will. We'll have another live stream out, by the way. If you missed before when I said, if you haven't subscribed, hit that thumbs up button, because it does mean a massive amount to me. We will be live again tomorrow. We're going to be talking about the pathway for younger players into the first team, because it's non-existent at Everton and it needs to change. Eugene says Everton received the Marty Gray injury update. The only update that I've seen is that they hope, the club hope that it's not as bad as first feared, which is not really an update, is it? Because we didn't really know what was first feared. The club could come out and say, oh, it's not as bad as first feared. We first feared he'd be out for a week. It's not as bad as that, and we'd all be saying, it's right, sound. But the club could say, well, we first feared he'd be out for 10 years. It's not as bad as that. Well, that means he could be out for 8 years. So it's not much of an update because we don't know what was first feared. There was rumours about 4 to 6 weeks, but nothing was ever really confirmed. And to be fair, Abdoulaye Doucouré was not as bad as first feared, but he's still out injured. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, a couple of months ago, was not as bad as first feared, but he's still out injured as well. So, Jason says, hi Cam lad, there was me hoping you weren't going to bother. I have to, mate. I have to do a review for every game. Of course we do. As I said, if you missed the start and you're sort of thinking, why is he doing a review on a Wednesday when the game's on a Sunday? I've been suffering with a bit of a chest infection over the last couple of days, so today was the first time I could really sit down and hold a conversation in work without coughing my guts up. So I thought, we're going to do it now. Eugene says, Rafa Benitez forward options as Everton crisis deepens. David says, no spirit. When those players cross the line, they are playing for the fans first. No arguments, no buts. They are playing for the fans. When were they last told that? Well, again, it's another one of those, isn't it? Are these players, they shouldn't have to be told that for a start. They should know that. But even if they are told that, it doesn't make a difference really if they don't care about what they're being told. You could have a player at Finch Farm who is being told every single day that, he's playing for the fans and that, he's got to be better and got to put a better performance in and, got to show the fans that you care, this, that and the other. And he might be listening to that conversation and then going home thinking, I'm not even asked about the fans, just asked about getting a wage and basically robbing Leo. I'm not asked about playing for the fans. So it doesn't matter how many times the players are told that message, is if they want to listen or not. And if they don't want to listen, I don't care who you are. I don't. I've said this openly before. I'm just going to name drop here. I don't care if you're Alex Iwobi, Solomon Rondon, Seamus Coleman, Luca Dean, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Richarlison, Andros Townsend, Damari Gray, Jordan Pickford, Yerry Mina, Michael Keane. If you're not really interested about playing for this football club and not really interested about playing for these fans, then do one. Do one for me. Don't care how good you are, who you are, how well you've played, do one. Because that's not the mentality we need at this club. Mitchell says, Cam, answer me this, mate. If Liverpool's spine of their team is out injured, how many times would we have heard it on Sky or plastered over the newspapers? Happens to Everton and nobody bats an eyelid. No, you're spot on, mate. You're spot on. You're right. Listen, injuries have been shocking with us. Absolutely shocking. We've done many of live stream and many of videos on injuries over the last couple of months or so, talking about Calvert-Lewin, Yerry Mina, Abdoulaye Doucouré, etc, etc. You're right. If it had happened to Liverpool had one injury last season and it was all over the news for about the last year. Oh, they're definitely not going to win the title because this lad's out injured. Oh yeah, but this is why they're losing, because he's out. Didn't mention that they lost 7-2 whilst he was in the team, but you're right. Any of those top teams. Can you imagine if Cristiano Ronaldo, I was going to say Harry Maguire and Scott McTominay, but they're shite, aren't they? But can you imagine the whole spine of Chelsea's team, or as I said, Liverpool? It'd be everywhere. It happens to Everton, and it's a nonsense conversation. And I get it. I get that this Everton team, fully fit, with everybody fit, is much better than where we are now, and would probably have won. Beating Wolves a couple of weeks ago, beating Watford, beating Tottenham last week, would have probably, worked a lot harder and performed a lot better against, Man City the other day. Would probably beat Brentford on Sunday. But the problem for me is injuries, again, is another thing, and our injury luck is disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. I've never, ever in my 23 years watching football, I've never witnessed a side have worse injury luck than Everton. I just haven't. However, as I said, this is a squad with £500 million. You look at the players that are out injured. Okay, Abdoulaye Doucouré cost, 20 odd million. Yerry Mina cost 20 odd million. Dominic Calvert-Lewin cost £1 million. £1 million. Damari Gray, £1.5 million. You've still got 20, 30, £40 million players in this Everton squad. Multiple £20 million players that aren't good enough. Multiple £30 million players that are nowhere near good enough, that are fit and playing. So there's other issues, but I completely agree, Mitchell. I completely agree. Jason says, we didn't give them any issues. Man City played like Sengate. And that's my problem. We didn't cause them any problems. We didn't cause them any issues. Anyone mentioned Carlos Fear 500 comments? I haven't. To be fair, probably worse than a Fear 500, to be honest. Fear 500s are alright. I think he's done us generous there. I'd say one of those Lecky scooters that's being battered by a teenage person who's throwing it into every single fence in the city. I'd say we're more like one of them. Not very fast, and not very mobile, and yeah, I'd say we're more like one of them. Mitchell says they'd rather be boss at charity than good at football. You're spot on. Ewan says Everton play Brentford away this Sunday. We certainly do. I haven't got any Ferrero Rochers, says Wormy. Interesting. I like a Ferrero Rocher, mate. Should have brought some to the party. Says, hey guys. Mitchell says, go on, Cam, love the passion. Cheers, my mate. Wormy says, Cam, lad, how's everyone doing? David says, spoons. Peter says, Benitez too stubborn to blood youngsters, too stubborn to change zonal marking. But we're going to talk about the young players in tomorrow's live stream. Eugene says, on Yango's first team goal, I assume you're talking about his goal as a player, not goal as in literal goal. J3 says, as a Hammers fan, I think Brands is shit. Well, interesting. Listen, West Ham are doing very, very well at the moment without a director of football, or certainly without, with the director of football that works very well with the manager. So, not much I can say about that. David says, on Iwobi being really talented, what does the sign say? Finch Farm. Spot on, my mate, spot on. Lewis says, alright, Cam, if I see Iwobi starting at the weekend, I'll probably cry, feel bad for him. But you think, but it's not just Iwobi, is it? It's not just Iwobi. Reality of the situation is Solomon Rondon isn't good enough and will probably start at the weekend. Michael Keane isn't good enough and will probably start at the weekend. Seamus Coleman, anymore isn't good enough and will start at the weekend. So it's not just Alex Iwobi. The majority of this team isn't good enough and will still start. But it's that not being good enough but giving 100% versus the not being good enough and not being asked. Jason says we've got Liverpool next Wednesday and then Arsenal next weekend. It's scary, yeah. And David says they have no way into the first team. Contacts just protect the potential asset. And Jazzy says, how does Everton buy a bit par player for 35 million from Arsenal? Machete bought a Iwobi and Tossen, says David. Well, there you go. That's another that's another big question, isn't it? Is to who bought Alex Iwobi? Because I am not convinced that Marcel Brands was willing to pay that much money for Alex Iwobi. Some people are. I'm not. Some people know much more than I do. But I certainly think there was an influence by a certain other party in those discussions. So there you go. Anyway, let's get into the second half. We will get back in the live comments before we finish up, but let's get into the second half before we do that. Everton come back out for the second half, as I said, 1-0 down. Very much against the run of play now. Obviously, it was always going to be difficult for us to get a result in this game. Never mind get a result, when being 1-0 down away to the champions. It was sort of nigh on impossible at that point. Again, I was sort of maybe blind hope, but I was sort of hoping that something would change at half time. Maybe that the manager would have had a bit of a stern conversation with the players. Maybe there would have been a change in personnel at that point, but nothing really did seem to change, did it really? I mean, yes, okay, we made a couple of changes later on, but other than that, it was a resumption of what the first half was, and that effectively was Manchester City picking the ball up, moving it far too easy into our half, creating chance after chance after chance, and Everton not really doing anything. Really, not really defending the chances. They were almost just City were almost unlucky with it, not creating anything going forward. And the second goal comes, and again, to be fair, look, it's an absolutely wonderful, pardon me, that's that chest infection. It's an absolutely wonderful strike by Rodri. It is. There's not much else I can say about it other than it was sublime. And it was absolutely sublime. Nothing Jordan Pickford could do. Why he's not being picked up in the midfield is another thing. But again, it's a fantastic strike. It's 2-0, and by this point it was game, set and match. You know, there was little chance we were getting 1 goal. We were never, ever getting 2 goals. And it's just fact. We were never, ever getting 2 goals. Rodri makes it 2. As I said, City do what City do. And to be fair to Manchester City, this is the mentality I wish Everton had, is when you go 2-0 up in games, which you very rarely do, but you don't sort of then sit back and go, right, job done that. You know, you assess if a team is, you know, almost sort of given up, and you go for the kill, and you go and get more, and you want to get more, and you want to get another, and you want to get a third and a fourth and a fifth, because that 2-0 is a very dangerous scoreline. Had Everton have scored to make it 2-1, you know, there'd have been a little bit of a worry for Pep Guardiola. Probably not for us as Evertonians, because we'd have known that we could have scored and made it 2-1 with an hour to go and wouldn't have got the equaliser. But for Pep Guardiola, he'd have probably looked at it and gone, 2-0, you know, if they get one back here, the confidence will switch and we could throw it. Ultimately, we didn't. They continue pressing, continue creating. We at this point are just beating a dead animal, effectively. At this point, you know, you just sort of, you're kicking a man while he's down, to quote the saying, or kicking a human while he's down, whatever it is at the moment. We were on the floor, not giving anything to the game. Rafa Benitez made some late changes, bringing on Tyler and Yango, which was nice to see, but he never was really given enough time to do anything. And Solomon Rondon come on and had his, you know, usual walk around and done nothing for 5 minutes. And then they get the third. Again, nice bit of play. Probably the only goal that I would have a big concern with the defence for, because I just think it's far too easy for them to play it round it. The first goal is a great ball, and whilst you could put some blame on Michael Keane, I think it's just a great goal. The second goal is an unbelievable strike, but the third goal, I think, defensively is really, really poor. There's 3 players going for 1 ball, and, you know, I can't remember who it was, but the City player just slots it through to Bernardo Silva, and he puts it beyond Jordan Pickford, and that's it. Game, set and match. City see the game out 3-0, and arguably it's the most comfortable Manchester City. It's the most comfortable of a win Manchester City will have against the so-called team that aspire to challenge for Europe or aspire to play in Europe. Keep seeing players and manager and all of these different people within the club come out and talk about Europe. Stop talking about Europe. Please, please, please. If there's anybody in Everton's media team watching this video, and there might well be, please stop asking the manager and the players about Europe. And if they answer a certain question and mention Europe, just cut it from the interview, because you're fucking embarrassing yourselves and you're embarrassing us as fans. You can't come out and talk about, yeah, our aspiration is to play in Europe, and then perform like that, roll over like that. Yes, we're playing the best team in the league, or one of the best teams, whatever, but roll over like that, lose 5-2 at home to Watford, lose to Wolves in shocking fashion, not have a win since September. You can't seriously come out and flog the Europe horse. You know, again, you know, our aspiration is to play in Europe. It's not impressing anybody. It's not. It simply isn't impressing nobody. If a player is asked what the aspiration is, can you just get them to say, to take every game as it is and win every game? Or, you know, again, work hard, battle hard, give it 110% in every game. That, for me, goes further than players coming out and saying, well, you know, obviously our aspiration is to finish in Europe at the end of the season. It ain't fucking happening, mate. It ain't happening, so stop saying it. You're embarrassing yourselves by coming out and saying things like that and then performing the way in which you do 2 or 3 days later. Because those performances aren't the performances of a team that have aspirations of playing in Europe. Those performances aren't the performances of a group of players that, you know, feel like they're good enough to play in Europe. Those performances are performances of a group of players that think, fuck it, whatever happens, happens. So stop mentioning Europe. It's embarrassing. And yeah, as I said, the game finishes. Listen, I wish I could sit here and talk for the next 20 minutes, half an hour about Everton's impact in that second half, but there was none. There absolutely was none. There was zero impact whatsoever. Zilch, I'd go as far as to say zilch. I like that word. I think it's a boss word. Zilch. We had zilch impact in that second half. We had very little impact in the first half, to be fair. But the second half was atrocious. Absolutely atrocious. Possessions wise, they had 77%, we had 23%. They had 17 goal attempts to our 4. I can't remember 4 goal attempts, to be honest with you. I think one of them might have been a Richarlison overhead kick that he didn't connect with. We had 1 shot on goal, they had 7, 6 shots off goal, they had We had none, they had 6. Yeah, and the rest of the stats are not very good in our favour. So, yeah, they had over 860 passes and we had under 250. So, as I said before, when you're playing Manchester City and you are accepting that you're not going to have a lot of possession, i.e. less than 25%, and you're accepting that you're not going to have much, many passes of the ball, i.e., less than, a quarter of what the opposition is going to have, you simply can't get the ball and just kick it up and go, yeah, have it back. You've just had it for 15 minutes and we've got it now, but you have it back. It's nonsense. It's absolutely nonsense. But yeah, that's how, as I said, I'd love to sit in and talk about Everton's involvement in the second half, but there was none. If you're enjoying, by the way, so far, please hit that like button. Don't forget to get your thoughts in the live comments if you're watching live. We'll get involved with as many of them. If you're watching a YouTube video, leave your thoughts down below as well. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, all of that sort of stuff. Let's get into the live comments before we do finish up then. Bright says, Cam in the comment section. Yes, I'm back here, mate. Guadav says, Liverpool versus Everton Academy. Trent Alexander-Arnold, Curtis Jones and now Morton look good. Add young recruits like Elliott makes Everton's academy look amateurish. Well, the problem is that Everton's academy has got players in it that look good and are impressing and are, seemingly much better than what the under-23 level is. But as I said before, and as we're going to talk about on tomorrow's live stream around about the same time as this one, about 4:45, there's no pathway into the first team, so it doesn't matter how good of a player it is. If the manager would rather pick a fella who does nothing every week than a young lad who maybe got something to prove, okay, he might be good enough. And I get the argument of, well, what if Lewis Dobbin just isn't good enough? What if the manager doesn't want to throw him in at the deep end? I get all of that. I get all of it. But why isn't he given an equal chance as the other players who aren't good enough? Charlie Ibbott says, "Hiya mate, big up. What's happening?" He says, "I'm a City fan. I thought Everton were poor." You're not the only one there, my mate. David says, "Who is worse than us? Norwich, Newcastle, and Burnley all having a go. We're bottom of the form table. We'll be bottom 6 by Boxing Day, right in the shit." You know what? Looking at the fixtures coming up, it's very hard to form an argument against that. It is. Wayne says, "Aspirations might be to play in the top 4. Your actions will have us playing against relegation." Yeah. I agree. Well, for me though, I don't want to get philosophical, but for me, if I've got an aspiration, and my aspiration, let's say I'm sitting there, I've been going to the gym recently, last couple of weeks, and I'm loving it. Boss, love going to the gym, love getting fit. If I've got an aspiration to have a 6-pack come Christmas, really good body, and I've got a 6-pack come Christmas, but every night I get home from work, instead of thinking, I'm going to go to the gym here, or I'm going to go and do some boxing training, or I'm going to get myself fit, or I'm going to do a core workout, I'm sitting here on the PlayStation thinking, yeah, that's my aspiration, but I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm just going to sit here and play PlayStation. Then is it really my aspiration, or am I just chatting absolute arse? Because I'd say I'm just chatting absolute arse. If you've got an aspiration, you go and try and make that happen. And if our aspiration is European football, then why are we performing the way in which we are? Because there's no doubt that this team can perform better than what they are, because we've seen it before. We've seen it, so yeah. Izzy says, "Wonderful first touch, lovely quick feet with an eye for the killer ball in the final third. Lots of gurus were quite pleased when we sold him too. I can't explain his decline at Everton." Yeah, listen, technically Alex Iwobi is a very good footballer, but again, yeah. It's not all about technical ability, is it? David says, "Iwobi came in because Machedi wanted to sanction signing Zaha. As usual, business was last minute, and Machedi was informed that Iwobi was available. Brands did bring Delph in, though." Yeah, I've spoken about the Delph signing before. It hasn't worked out, but I didn't think it was that bad at the time. But yeah, Izzy says, "Call me crazy, but Iwobi was really good for us, especially in AW's Arsene Wenger's last season. He was one of our top 3 players, better than Alexis and Lacazette, etc. Finished the season really strong too." Yeah, obviously he scored in that European final, didn't he? Again, I don't know. I don't know what the problem is with Alex Iwobi. If I did, then I'm sure Rafa Benitez would be on the phone to me. Nobody will want to stay. This is 2 or 3 of our seasons a crap. Gurudav says, "Who would you keep long term in this squad?" Oh, mate. Jordan Pickford. Abdoulaye Doucouré, Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison, Anthony Gordon, and maybe Demarai Gray. Everybody else is up for contention. Everybody else. For different reasons, but everybody else is up for contention. Louis says, for me, the difference in Iwobi is cost 35 million, whereas Rondon was free. Coleman put in 10 years of quality into the club. Yeah, I'm not disputing Coleman's, his history with the club and how good he's been over the years. What I'm saying is he's not good enough now to start week in, week out in the Premier League for a team with aspirations of finishing Europe. That's fact. Not like Rafa has many options, says Whammy. Yeah, Pro Team says Benitez's tactics and substitutions are starting to worry me. There you go. Izzy says, happens when you aren't media darlings like Liverpool, United and Chelsea. Cam, the agenda setting is there to see. Yeah, no, I agree. Absolutely. They've got to cover their back, haven't they? If Liverpool or United have a bad season, it's got to be because of a certain reason. It can't just be that they're not very good. It's got to be that something's happened or an injury or whatever. What happened to Andre Gomez? Injured. Stevie Sam says, sorry, Cam, late to the scene. We've spoken about how shite they all are, to be honest with you, mate. We haven't just singled out Alex Iwobi. We've spoken about how bad the majority of this squad is. We had 8 players out versus Brentford and City, and the media were loving every second, said Izzy, which they've created, says the bike squad. Do you think the board realised the problems and the mess we're in? No, and that's my biggest worry, and this is why we're going to have a discussion about the board in the next few days, weeks, because that's my biggest worry with the board, is that I genuinely think they sit there and think everything is going swimmingly, everything is absolutely fine, we're where we need to be. And it's quotes like the AGM thing that I mentioned earlier. We don't have to do an AGM, but we're going to do one. Almost like, you should be grateful that we're doing this because we don't have to do it. It's things like that make me think this board doesn't really understand that things aren't going very well. Yes, we're getting a brand new stadium and it's going to look boss, this, that and the other. Park that for a minute, because at this moment, I'm not asked about Bramley-Moore. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't give a shit about Bramley-Moore at this moment. I care about what I'm watching week in, week out. And I don't think this board do. Would rather Sim start than goal. Rondon, says Jared. Yeah, Izzy says Everton need another 8 in midfield badly. Doucouré being injured is huge. Yeah, we should have brought in a replacement for Abdoulaye Doucouré and we didn't. Makes sense now that Arsenal wouldn't sell their club to Macheri, says Jared. Do you think Ellis Sims is ready? Because I think he is. I don't know. But we're not going to know until he gets given an opportunity, are we? And if the club don't think he's ready, then what's his pathway? Why give him a new contract? As a Gooner, I feel your pain, Cam. Both clubs seem to have accepted mediocrity for way too long now. Yes, spot on. David says none of them can pass a ball. Very struggle to control a thing, and their vision is reserved for paychecks, cars, houses, and clobber. Yeah, there you go. Game says Richie is suspended for the Brighton game. He is. Wayman says we overpay all of our players because the recruitment has left such a shit squad. I'm amazed Alan isn't injured yet. There is no right position for Iwobi, Cam. He hasn't got the brain for Cam or the vision or passing. Yeah, his passing isn't good enough. I would agree his passing isn't good enough. Marcel Brands is top 10 most overrated people in football, says Louis. Interesting. Jared says the manager and the team had a free weekend last weekend. Nobody expected anything from this game. The big match is this weekend, but with Richie and Gray out, it looks bleak. There must be activity in January. It does look bleak. Louis says couldn't agree more, Cam. The problem is higher up at the club, but I won't blame Macheri. Steve Walsh and Marcel Brands have wasted all his money. I will blame Macheri because I think I'm not just fully blaming Macheri, but ultimately he's employing these people who aren't very good at their jobs, so he has to take blame. Saul says, hope you're well, Cam. I'm not too bad, mate. Honestly, questioning what's the point. It's clear the majority of the people at the club don't care about it, and we're not careful. That'll trickle down to us fans. Yes, I think there's already evidence of that. Certainly, even me. I got home on Sunday night, and usually I'd be unhappy or upset or fuming after an Everton game, whereas I sort of just felt like, who gives a shit anymore? If these players don't care, then who gives a shit? Jason says, heard on Toffee TV the other day we're being linked with a loan for Pepe with an option to buy next summer. Arsenal paid 72 million for him. They'll want most of that back. Seems we could chuck money away as soon as we can spend. Well, let's hope that if the option is to buy, it's very, very cheap, because I think he's inconsistent, to be honest with you. but we'll wait and see. The bike truck says you're spot on about the whole club is a mess, no structure, no long-term plan. Concern is they can't see the problems they've created. Ambition got to come from the top. David says, let's have it right. The team is secondary as long as we're in the Prem moving into Bramley-Moore. The asset is protected. I am not confident we'll be in the Prem moving into Bramley-Moore, David. If it carries on like this, I'm not confident we'll be in the Prem moving into Bramley-Moore. To be honest with you. And Peter says the board are only interested in Bramley-Moore dock and awards for Everton in the community. The supporters are an afterthought at best. The people's club, my arse. There you go. As I said, are we run as a football club? There's serious questions about that. David says we have the best bench in Liverpool. Cam, kill your Jets on the board. When can Everton use their money, says Just Gary? Well, we'll have a little bit more to spend in January. Not a massive significant amount. And it's January anyway. So it's always difficult to spend in January. So before we see any real progress, it will probably be next summer. Probably 18 months' time, unless you wait for bin FFP. Yeah. I'm sorry, bro, but I just give up with Everton. Just the same shit every year. See, as we mentioned before, trickling down. And Wimmy says, I'm worried about the recruitment across the board if we continue as we are buying old players, average players, just to become deadwood and not buying players at all. Rondon ain't cutting it. Well, yeah, there you go. There's as I said, there is many issue at this football club, and there was a lot of issues on display on Sunday, but there's a lot of issues that go further than the playing staff, and certainly go further than a manager that's been here for 10 minutes. Let me tell you that. We're going to sit down tomorrow and talk about the pathway from the Everton Academy into the Everton first team, or should I say the lack of pathway, and then over the next few days we'll have the preview to the Brentford game on Friday, of course, and then when we can in between, maybe next week, we're going to sit down and talk about the board, because there needs to be a serious conversation about it. Might try and get somebody on to have that chat with me as well. But anyway, that is going to do it for today's live stream. If you have enjoyed this one, please do hit that like button. It does only take a second. A massive thank you to everybody in the live comments as usual. Really do appreciate all of the support. If you're watching a YouTube video, leave your thoughts in the comment section down below, and we will be getting involved with as many of them as we possibly can. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. That would be absolutely brilliant. And yeah, massive thank you for watching. Not a great result, not a great performance, not a surprise, but still a massive thorn in my throat considering the money we've spent and how bad we are. It's just not good enough. It really isn't. Anyway, that is going to do it for today. Big thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this one, please do leave a like. Eugene's to see you about the top. You see you tomorrow. Thank you very much, Eugene. As I said, leave a like if you've enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you soon on the Mighty Blues. Cheers for watching. See you after.